Should you rent or should you buy? I got a question from someone asking this. This is a very common question. And most of the people that are giving you advice on this are not giving you the right advice because they are not really analyzing the situation the right way. So I'm going to break this down for you. And hopefully after the end of this video, you will know for sure whether you should rent or buy or actually have a framework for figuring this out. Right? So I've been a real estate investor for the last 24 years. I've made millions of dollars in real estate. So let me give you kind of the breakdown on this. First of all, you have to wear two different hats when you're evaluating this. The first one is the renter hat, and the second one is the investor hat, right? And you have to optimize for each of these things in order to make the correct decision, because whatever you do has to be the best for the renter and has to be the best for the investor. And a lot of times the same property is not both of those things. It can be, but a lot of times it's not. So first of all, let's put on the renter hat. So as a renter, you got to think about what things. One, the price, right? So, and when I say the price, what this really means is the price you need to pay for what you need, right? So if you need one bedroom and that's all that you need because you're a single guy living by yourself, then there's a certain price in your market where you're living in proximity for that. Also, you need location. So where are you at? Where do you want to be? Where do you want to live at? Where are you in relation to your work and to your commute, right? That's important. So as a renter, it's mainly those two factors that you're looking at. Now, in terms of the price also, like I said, you don't want to rent, if you only need a 1-bedroom place, you probably don't want to rent a 3 or 4-bedroom place, right? Because it's going to cost you a lot more, okay? So that's the renter hat. The second hat you put on is the investor hat. If you buy an investment, what do you want as an investment property? Well, you want it to have the potential or be able to return good cash flow on that. So if I'm investing in real estate, right, I want to buy a property where the rent that I can get for that would pay for the mortgage and then hopefully some of the other expenses. I would at least break even or make some cash flow on that so that I can make money in the long term. I'm not going to go into details of how you make money in real estate. If you're interested in that, you can shoot me an email at john@bulldogmindset.com. I've got a program where I can help you to become financially free and learn how to invest in real estate. So we'll talk more about that later. But the idea is that as an investor, you want to find something that is a good return on your investment. That's the primary thing that you're looking for, right? It doesn't matter so much location in terms of your work, right? It doesn't even matter necessarily what the price is as long as you can get a good return on your money, right? So when we look at those two hats, right, then you can now address this question of should you rent or buy? Well, the renter should do what is best for the renter, right? So if you're looking at a property and you're saying, okay, well, should I buy this property and live in it, or should I buy an investment property and continue to rent, right? Because those are kind of the options we're looking at. We've got some money to put as a down payment on property. What do we do? Do we buy an investment property? Do we continue renting? Do we buy a property and live in it, right? So if you look at those two hats, let's say you're considering a property. Well, you got to look at it from the renter perspective, right? For example, if you're in a situation where you're a single guy, you're living in a 1-bedroom place and that's all that you need, then maybe your rent might be, let's say $1,000 a month. I don't know. Okay. Depends on your market. If you looked at the house, you're probably not going to find a 1-bedroom house. Or maybe you could find a condo or something like that, but probably you're going to find like a 2 or 3-bedroom house. So maybe that 3-bedroom house, let's say that you would buy instead of renting, you're going to have 2 rooms that are wasted. And so as a renter, you're going to pay more money because you're going to pay the mortgage payment and then the other things that are associated with the house, utilities and all that stuff, the maintenance of the house. And so maybe now you're paying $3,000 or $4,000 a month. So that's a waste. That doesn't make sense because you're wasting that space. You understand what I'm saying, right? You might say I'm throwing away money renting, but you're throwing away more money if you are buying a property that you're not utilizing the space and you're having to pay for a bigger property than what you need, right? So that's that first consideration. Now, yeah, you're going to make a principal payment on the loan and that you can take into account to subtract that from that total cost, because it's like putting money in the bank. However, you have to compare that against the option of buying an investment property and continuing to rent. So let's say that same house that you're considering, like a 3-bedroom house, that the mortgage might be $3,000 a month. Let's say that instead you consider that as an investment property, and maybe you can get some pretty good rents for that. Maybe you get $3,500 a month rent for that, right? And so you could continue renting for $1,000 a month, and you can rent out this house, buy this house and rent out this house and make $500 a month. So it's almost subsidizing your rent. So you're really paying $500 a month by making that choice. Whereas if you bought the house and lived in it, you would now be paying $3,000 a month. Does that make sense? And you could take out the $1,000 that you would be paying in rent. So you're paying $2,000 extra a month. So that's not a very smart choice. That doesn't make very much sense. And that's why a lot of times it doesn't make sense to buy. Now, if your situation's different and you need a 3-bedroom place and you're renting a 3-bedroom place and now you could buy one, sometimes it is actually the way that the prices work in the market that it might be more economical for you to buy it. Now, there's a couple other considerations to take into place here, or into account here. So one is, we said, the location, right? So obviously, a lot of times the more convenient locations are going to have a higher rent on them. All right. And for properties, for buying a property, it's going to be a lot higher than the rents because it's a convenient location. So you got to take that into consideration. But there's a couple other things to think about here. So first of all is the advantages that you get by buying a house that you live in instead of investment property. So by buying a house that you live in, there's a couple of advantages you're going to get. The first advantage is that you can probably come in with a lower down payment. So you might be able to buy that house for 5% down or 2.5% down. There's some first-time homebuyer programs, FHA loans, things like that. So with investment property, you might need to put 10 or a lot of times 20% down nowadays. So that's one thing to think about, is you have better leverage if you're going to do that, if you do a lower down payment. Okay, now your payment's going to be higher, so you got to take that into consideration. The second thing that's going to happen is that you're going to get a lower interest rate on your loan, about 0.5 point to a point, depends on, investment properties have a premium on the loan, the interest. So you're going to have a little bit of paying less interest, which might bring those payments down, which could make sense. And the third thing that you're going to get is you're going to get a renter that pays the rent on time and doesn't damage the property. That's you, and never is going to, you have to worry about evicting or being vacant. So that is, if you're treating the home that you live in, that you buy, as an investment, then that makes sense. All right. Now, the other thing to think about is that if you moved out of that property, could you rent it successfully? Is it still a good investment? That's the other piece that we didn't talk about before. But so that's one thing to consider. Okay. And so there's some consideration, some situations where when it's pretty close, but you can come in with a much less down payment by buying the house, that would be the best move to do, is because now you can take, let's say that you had enough money to put 25% down on property. Well, if you buy a house to live in as your first property and you put 5% of that into that one, and then you could take that other 20% that you had and you could put that into an investment property as well, then that would make sense. You're getting 2 properties instead of 1 for the same amount of money, essentially, right? That could make sense. The other place where it can make sense is house hacking. So let's say you are that guy who only needs a 1-bedroom apartment or studio, and you buy a 3 or 4-bedroom house. Well, if you can rent out each one of those rooms, you might be able to get the whole place paid for you. Now, it's a little bit of a hassle doing that, but that can make sense. Then it would make a lot of sense. And that would be your best first move. If you're starting out and you're trying to make this decision, I would do that. If you can do that, if you can do a first-time home buyers thing, buy a nice 3 or 4-bedroom house, and you can rent out all the rooms, that's going to be a great financial move for you. You could also do this with a duplex or a triplex or a fourplex and live in one of the units if you don't want to rent out rooms. And you're still going to get some of the advantages of sort of a hybrid between a house that you live in and one that you invest. So those are really the main things to think about. It's not just based on interest rate. It's not just based on prices. It's based on the utility value to you and what, if I were you, I would make a spreadsheet, and this is what I would do. All right. I would weigh out this different scenarios. I would say, okay, if I buy this property and I live in it, what will my total expenses be, right? And how much money will it cost me? Versus what if I were to rent where I'm renting now and buy the property and not live in it and rent it out to someone else, right? Because that you're going to get the market rent for that, and you can figure out those numbers, and you can see how that's going to change over time. And so you can weigh out those scenarios. And that's the real way to do this is to actually use the math and actually look at this and see what makes the most sense. It's not just a simple answer. It's not just always one thing or the other. It doesn't just depend on the market. It just doesn't depend on the prices. It depends on your situation. Now, if you want some help with this kind of stuff and getting started in real estate investing, that's great. I've been doing this for 24 years. Like I said, I've become financially free from it. I have bought countless properties, and I make about $15,000 a month of passive income from real estate right now, maybe 20, somewhere around there. It depends on the month. Shoot me an email at john@bulldogmindset.com. And I do have a program where you can work with me personally, and I can give you some information about how to see if you're a good fit for that.